So I'm delighted to introduce you now to Professor Gerry Rayman and Professor Partha Kar, who are both consultant diabetologists, Partha obviously at Portsmouth and Gerry from Ipswich, and both GIRFT leads, so getting it right first time. And they're going to talk to us about how we can tackle health inequalities in diabetes care. Take it away.
Thank you very much. I'm really delighted to be here and delighted to see so many of you. You're really doing a fabulous job. And as most people have said today, is that actually you are the guys who are delivering the majority of diabetes care. So it's really important. So let's tell you a little bit about what Partha and I have been doing over the last 4 or 5 years in GIRFT and also in NHSE. So what have we been doing? Well, first of all, I hope you all know what GIRFT is. It stands for Getting It Right First Time, and it's about reducing variation in delivery of services, and diabetes is one of the areas that we're concentrating on in GIRFT. We work also with NHS Diabetes, Diabetes UK, ABCD, JBDS, and the RCP, and we've just had this discussion, we need to be working with you. So, forwards. So when Partha and I were first appointed, we looked to see what we should be concentrating on. And we looked at the areas of diabetes care which we felt were not necessarily being prioritized. And those were diabetic foot disease, inpatient diabetes care, and you all know that I'm really passionate about those two, and type 1 diabetes and transitional care and technology, and you know that Partha is particularly passionate about those. So we worked together well as a team, concentrating on those various aspects. So what did we do? And at the beginning, we visited 104 of the 134 trusts. We didn't get round to everyone because of COVID. And from that, we made observations, first of all, the clinical data that we got from HES and NDA and so on, but also the services that they said they were providing and where they were experiencing difficulties. And that allowed us not only to support them in the discussion at the time of the visit, but also allowed us to produce this GIRFT diabetes report with recommendations of what should be in place to deliver best diabetes care. So why did we concentrate on diabetic foot services? Partly related to this, the huge variation. This is Sir Mew Gray's, this is 2012, I think. And you can see down in the southwest that it had really high amputation rates. So the question was why? Was it because older people retired to the southwest? We didn't think so. We thought it was actually because the services down there were less good than the services elsewhere. And I'm really pleased to say that a great colleague of ours, Richard Paisley, was concerned about this. He worked down in the southwest and he looked to see what services were being delivered, and he identified 10 particular aspects of good diabetes services. And then he looked to see how many were in place in various parts of that region. And you can see those with fewer services had the higher amputation rates compared with those that had more services in place. He didn't only leave it at that. There was a big thrust in the southwest to improve the provision of foot care services, and the result was amazing. No doubt about it, you have the right things in place and you will get lower amputation rates. In fact, we did this a number of years ago in Ipswich, and that was one of the first publications to demonstrate the importance of having a community and hospital multidisciplinary foot team. And indeed, working with Barbara Young and Diabetes UK, we came up with the putting feet first. So none of this is really rocket science. It's obvious. If you get to see the multidisciplinary foot team as early as possible, you will have a smaller ulcer, and you can see self-referral in less than 2 days, less severe ulcers. If you have a less severe ulcer, you're more likely to heal within 12 and 24 weeks. And in addition, if you have a less severe ulcer, you have less likelihood that you'll be going into hospital with a problem, and you will stay for less length of time. So that's not rocket science. It's so obvious, and we need to have that in place. So NG19, which I contributed, actually defined what the services should look like, and that is exactly what we replicated in our GIRFT report. In addition, we put in the importance of having provision to renal and dialysis units. So that is what we're trying to achieve across the country, reduce the variation in the provision of services. So this comes from the National Diabetes Inpatient Audit, and you'll see the provision of multidisciplinary foot services in 2010 was only about 27%. There was a big push from Diabetes UK in about 2017, and you see it came down to 18%. And there was then, from our GIRFT recommendations, and also from the pressure from Diabetes UK and so on, there was NHSE transformation funding, and you can see that's now down to 4.3%. So we really have made a significant improvement in the provision of these services. And what Partha said earlier, you'll be delighted to know that we have some of the lowest amputation rates in the world, but we can do better, there is no doubt. So why inpatient diabetes care? Well, we know from our patients that many have a poor experience. They stay longer, they have increased readmission rates, they have an increased mortality, they get pneumonia, myocardial infarction, AKI, and so on at an increased rate, partly related to poor diabetes control, and they have an increased mortality. We also know it's very costly, as shown there from Marion Kerr, and that's back in 2012. And, you know, this is just terrible. So we know from the National Diabetes Audit that people with diabetes in hospital represented about initially 15% of the inpatient bed base. In the last audit in 2019, it was 18.1%. I have no idea what it is today because we have not had a NADIA national audit for 4 years. But I can tell you within our trust, we were running at about 18%. We're now at between 25 and 31%. And I was speaking to Anne Clayton this morning, and she reckons they're between 36 and 40%. So this isn't going away. And we definitely need inpatient specialist nursing, as well as consultant provision into inpatient care. These patients are older. 1 in 3 are over the age of 80. They're 30% insulin treated. As you all know, there are frequent insulin errors. Terribly, 1 in 4 experiences severe hypoglycemic episodes, and 1 in 50 foot complications. Now, that was the original audit, but I've given you where we've started. And then 1 in 4 develops, with type 1 diabetes, develops DKA in hospital. That is really appalling. They look after themselves in the community, and they come in to us, and this is what happens. If this was happening in the community, 1 in 4 going into DKA, we'd be full of people with diabetes. So one of the most important things, and we'll come on to the recommendations, is that we need to give the reins back to the people with diabetes so they self-manage in hospital. So here is our list of recommendations: multidisciplinary foot teams, cover at the weekends, the teams meeting regularly and reporting to a safety board, a robust system to identify all admissions with diabetes, and a system to make sure that those patients who need help from the inpatient diabetes teams are escalated and seen within a short period of time. And then we also need to use the integrated blood glucose, with the web-linked blood glucose meters, to be able to identify those who've got out-of-range blood glucose and prioritize that care. To reduce insulin errors, we need to have in place a training amongst our staff, anyone who administers or prescribes insulin, and also perioperative care, which I will come on to in a minute, and then, as I said before, self-management. So how are we doing? So again, coming back to the National Inpatient Audit, in 2010, a third of hospitals didn't have any inpatient specialist nurses. The audit has driven an improvement down to 18%, but again with investment and working with NHSE, that is down to 7.2%, but we don't know where we are today because we haven't got the audit. Diabetes doesn't go away at the weekend, so you want to make sure that you've got a weekend service. You can see it was really abysmal in 2015. It's up to 32% now. We don't know where we are today. Fortunately, we have the transformation funds, and hopefully you've used it, and that figure will hopefully look much better. However, I know many services, the transformation funds stopped, and there was no further investment from the trust, which I think is a great shame. What else? So we need systems to identify all people with diabetes on admission, only 51%. Triage system, 71%. And then the use of the weight-linked glucose meters, 56%. So there is room for improvement. How about this? Training. We've got some great programs like the CDIP program. We've got raising awareness through hypo-awareness and insulin safety. There have been quality improvement training from the college and the NHS Digital and also Diabetes UK. But still, this is not mandatory. And fire safety is mandatory. How many people have died in the fire recently in the NHS? I know none in my whole career, right? But our patients, if they're poorly treated, may end up disadvantaged. So how are we doing about hypoglycemia? And you can see this is severe hypoglycemia, which significantly reduced since we put in Nadia. We have another auditing process now. Nadia has stopped. We've got what's called NDISA and Nadia harms. Now, the problems here is that not everyone reports. And even if you do report, not everyone reports all their data. So there's some mismatch, and you can't really compare this with what happened with Nadia. But you can still see that hypoglycemic events, which are in the blue, have reduced. And here is hospital-acquired diabetic foot lesions. You can see that significant, that halved with Nadia. And going forward, you can see again a reduction. This is now in the yellow, which is good. Sadly, neither following Nadia nor this has there been any change in DKA and HHS. And if any of you have a brilliant idea as to how we change this, I would be delighted to know. But I think the most important way of changing this is to educate the staff, and we are not doing it mandatory, right? Everyone should know that you never stop insulin on someone with type 1 diabetes. And I don't know what your experience is, but with the emergency department being overwhelmed and people sitting in corridors for 18 hours, they forget to give insulin, and we're seeing an increase in DKA in the emergency department. So we made some recommendations with Diabetes UK on what should be in place, and you can see that there's been a significant take-up of some of these recommendations. That takes me to perioperative diabetes. Perioperative diabetes is really important because poor perioperative care is associated with increased harm and increased length of stay. So here's medicine at 2 days, excess above the non-diabetic population, elective surgery 3 days, and emergency surgery 4 days. We can do something about this. We also know that the mortality is increased, so in yellow, diabetes. And we also know that if you have high blood sugars, you're more likely to die or acquire an infection. We also know that if you improve diabetes care, and this shows you basal bolus, this is American data, against sliding scale. Their idea of sliding scale is intermittent injections of rapid-acting insulin. You get better control with basal bolus, and you can see with basal bolus in the purple, there is a reduction in complications. A number of years ago, in fact, 2011, so 12 years ago, we came up with these guidelines for surgeons and anesthetists, well received, but never implemented. As a result of this, we went to the NC Pod and said, look, you've really got to look at perioperative diabetes care, and this was their report, High and Lows, which demonstrated significant problems in 65% of the trusts. As a result, the Academy of the Royal Colleges were appalled by this and tasked the Royal College of Anaesthetists to develop the Centre of Perioperative Care, and their priority was for diabetes, and this was published in 2021. Now, it's great to have guidelines, and you've seen updated guidelines and so on, but you have to have them implemented. And I'm afraid to say that is a problem. And we faced this within my own trust. We'd go and we say, look, we're really worried and we can help you and this, that. We're not interested. We don't see a problem. The reason they don't see it, they only look after people when the theatre door opens, and then their task finishes when the theatre doors close. So myself and Emma Page, who was my project lead at the time, we said, how are we going to solve this problem? And then it suddenly occurred to us, and the work that I was doing with Diabetes UK about patient power, I thought, well, we'll ask the patients to ask for the care that they deserve. And to do that, we came up with this thing called the Diabetes Passport for Surgery. And that contained all the information they needed to know about what should be in place. And so, for example, if you're on an insulin infusion and you're eating and drinking, it should be stopped. And if it hasn't been stopped, ask why not. Now, initially, when we brought this into Ipswich Hospital, they said they didn't need it. This is ridiculous. We give patients all this information, whatever. We're not going to help with this. So what we did was we found out who was coming in for surgery, and we sent it out to the patients. So the patients were informed, and they'd come into the pre-assessment, and they'd say, well, you haven't done this, or you haven't done that, or on the wards, they'd say, this hasn't happened, and that hasn't happened. And rather than getting people's backs up, they said, oh, that's interesting. And staff got educated, the patients got educated, and lo and behold, we had better outcomes. So the other key factor here was to appoint a perioperative nurse. And the perioperative nurse that we appointed, Rachel, was only half-time, she's now full-time. She was from a surgical background, and that was a real key to this, because previously we had our medical nurses going, DSNs, came from the medical wards, they were trained in medicine, and they went into the surgical units, and they were not necessarily welcome, and there was a bit of friction there. Whereas Rachel knew all these other people. And so she provided education, provided patient support, she provided pre-admission improvement in glucose control. And the result was a significant reduction in length of stay, back to that of the non-diabetic population, a significant reduction in post-operative complications. It was extremely well received by patients and also by the staff who had improved knowledge and confidence. So we did that, but the question was, that's a one-off, that's Ipswich Hospital. Can it happen elsewhere? And that's where GIRFT came in. And GIRFT said, we will support you to do this in 10 other trusts, which we did, and those were the trusts there. And this is now called the IP3D project, and the result of which is exactly the same. Reduction in hypoglycemic events, recurrent hypoglycemia, severe hyperglycemic events, and recurrent hyperglycemic events. So much better glycemic control. Does that make a difference? Yes. Length of stay, reduced. Admissions to critical care, reduced. A composite of all the diabetes complications, which includes foot and decay and so on, reduced. And post-operative infection reduced. It's got to happen. It's got to happen across the country. Staff knowledge and confidence, significant improvements. Patient experience, I won't read them, but really improved. And the great thing is those perioperative DSNs were really empowered. One of them said, I've been nursing for 20 years. This is the best thing I've ever done. Our lead anaesthetist, Ruth Roy, said exactly the same. And I can tell you these people are so inspired, and I'm so inspired by them. And those are the colleagues that they've trained on the surgical wards. It has been truly a fantastic project. Quite to our surprise, we were contacted by an American organization who said, we've heard about this. I think you should put in for this award. So we put in for this award and we won it. And Emma and I went off to Chicago to receive it. And on Tuesday night, they came over here. God knows how much it cost them. And we had a big dinner at one of the most expensive restaurants in the countryside of Suffolk. So we're rolling this out now. So if any of you are interested, please get in contact with us. There are the tools to help you develop the perioperative pathway, such as the business cases and so on, the passport. So that's what we've done. So the final thing is to tell you about what we're doing now. We're doing the gateway reviews, and that's Partha and I, again, going back into the, not this time into trusts, but into ICBs, because what we want to do is we want to join up provision of diabetes care across the whole community. And what are we doing in this? Well, first of all, we're looking at the provision of service, like, do they have the diabetes inpatient specialist nurses? Do they have access to blood glucose data and so on? And are they submitting data to the National Foot Audit and the various audits? We've got data. This is from Model Health Service, and you can all go into Model Health Service and see your own data. But you can see this trust has a prolonged length of stay for a fractured neck of femur. We've used fractured neck of femur as one of the most common emergency conditions. We've also looked, and I haven't got time to show you the data, just elective surgery, length of stay, and so on. And we use this to actually ask them, why is it like this, and what are you going to do about it? This is length of stay for DKA. What's really interesting is length of stay for DKA across the country seems to be going up. So it's, again, something we need to do. We also have developed something called best practice pathways. And you can see this is multidisciplinary. This one is around the front door. So I told you about things going wrong in the emergency department. There's some essential information that everyone with diabetes should have, foot checks and so on, and making sure that they're having their insulin and they're fed. There's information on the management of diabetic foot, not the management, the pathway. What do you do with someone who's got a diabetic foot? What do you do with someone who comes with just a high blood sugar? Can they go home? What do you do? Give them insulin? Do you give them a sulfonylurea or whatever? And also in hypoglycemia, do they all need to be admitted? No. Who can you discharge home? So that looks like that's the pathway for the foot. That's it on paper, but I don't know if I can do this. Can I hyperlink into this? Can you get this online? How are we doing for time? Are we okay?
Yes, sir. How are we doing?
Can you press on the management of patients presenting with ED with a foot problem? So this is now a tool. Okay, we'll leave it. But this is a tool which can sit on your iPhone or your iPad, which will allow you to access those pathways. And it has been really very popularly received. So we will be launching that on Monday. We've got other pathways. So there's a discharge pathway, which we've just completed, and we're just finalizing an emergency surgery pathway, which hadn't been done before. We've also worked on the accreditation with the Royal College of Surgeons, and you can see Daniel Flanagan leads this up. And then finally, I'm going to hand over to Partha in a minute, but why did we do type 1 diabetes? Because we do poorly in the UK. The red is us compared to Ireland, Austria, Germany, the Netherlands, and the States. That's for adults. and for children exactly the same. And it's partly because back in 2003, there was a focus on primary care diabetes and the thought that all this could be done in the community and the disempowerment of the specialist services. I think we are working to turn that around, and I think we certainly have done that. And then finally, transitional and young adult care, that's when things go wrong, the teenage years, but also that's when we have the increase in DKAs. And finally, you will know that NHS England has introduced this pilot program to try and understand what young people need for their services, why are they not coming, and how can we prevent the DKA. So I'm now going to hand you over to Partha.
Thank you very much. First of all, I think, Gerry, before you leave, so Gerry doesn't have access to social media, so you can keep hearing how amazing I am, right? Gerry doesn't do that. Gerry's a much more humble man. Can we have a round of applause for all the work Gerry's been doing? And a few other things to mention. So I think you'll hear a lot of things about policy, but I think you've had, before Gerry came along, two amazing talks, one from Helen, one from, well, two Helens, Helen and Helen. And I think one of the philosophies I want you to take away today is the important bit about keeping the patient at center. That's all that matters. Be nice. And I always say this one thing, is that people actually find 0.01% of their time with you. That's all they can afford. Right? In that 0.01% of their life that they're with you, just be one thing. If you can't be anything, just be nice. That's all that will change a lot of the care, to be honest, going forward. So, I'm going to tell you a story because I love telling stories. But before going on to this part of the story, I also forgot, I need to mention two names. One is, where is Paula? Paula Johnston. So Paula Johnston last night won the Diabetes Professional of the Year. Who said nurses are not there? Nurses are there. And I also wanted to mention Andrea Lake, where are you? Andrea is the new queen of the diabetes inpatient nurses, so those of you not aware. Okay, so here is the story. People always, we're all struggling, life is difficult. This is where we were in August 2017, just in case we forget. Total Libra, 0, because 2014 is when Libra came into the world. Our CGM uptake was that. A nice TA was in place. People always come and say, Partha, get the TA of closed loops through. It will be amazing. There's been a TA on NICE pumps since 2008. 15 years later, the uptake in adult teams, 15%. So it's not just the TA, it's the implementation. So we made some promises to see where we get to, and it's been a long journey. I always keep on saying, it takes time. So 2017, 2023, where we are, NICE, etc. But that's where we are now, right? 94% of all type 1 are either on Libra 2 or a Dexcom 1. 98% of type 1 diabetes pregnancy. Both are national audits which have come out. Have a look. The best results we've ever had. Pregnancy data showing improving every single marker. In a spate of bad news about mortality all across the board, have a look at the type 1 diabetes data. What technology has done. This is not about just making you feel better, which is important, but we have got lesser admissions to intensive care units, lesser baby malformations, lesser baby deaths. That's why we do the work we do, right? That's what matters. So, this is freestyle Libra prescribing. As we have gone, those of you who follow me on social media will know the famous maps. We chase, we hunt, and we challenge. This is 3 weeks ago. And that 2 gaps have also been closed. So at the moment, there are no areas, no formularies which don't have Libra 2 or Dexcom. And that is the job that we have. If somebody's, I encourage you, if you're having poor care, to raise it to us. Everybody who knows, I will pick up a phone. Patients do this. And some of you in the audience will have got emails from me where you're sitting there going, oh my God, why is he emailing me? And I'm emailing you because the person's come straight to me. And you need to think about why they're having to come straight to me. If they're not being able to resolve it, why is it needing me to pick up a phone and resolve it for you? Because if you have resolved it, you had the power to resolve it in the first place. So this is coming. This was great. These were two big national data sets in pediatric and adults, which are shown. Having said that, we have challenges. And I'm going to tell you a story about the pediatric population, which you need to understand. And I think this is important for you to take away. When we showed this data to people in 2019-20, when we started off, right? When I first showed the data that access of a CGM to a black child was the half of a white child, not decimal point half, right? Can't even blame GPs for it, it's all pediatric units. And I remember a pediatrician in a room put their hand up, a consultant, and said, I feel very offended. And I said, why do you feel offended? And he said, it feels like you're calling me a racist. And I said, I'm not, yet. But if you've seen the data and you've done nothing about it, tell me the term you want me to use and I'll use it. I'm not expecting you to change the data, but I want you to try something. And kudos to them. The gaps are closer, they're tighter, they're working hard at it. That's what data and accountability can bring. So I'm going to skip that, but is it possible to cut across socioeconomic deprivation? In Libra, that's the answer. Yes, it is. Guess what? When you give Libra to everybody, everybody gets it. Your postcode doesn't matter. The color of your skin doesn't matter. Universality is an important concept. That's what the NHS can do. Pregnancy, that's pretty much the holy grail. Everybody gets it. Everybody rejects it at the same rate. Everybody accepts it at the same rate. Your color of your skin must not matter, right? That's what the NHS can do. So here's the NICE TA coming out at the moment, and I'll quickly wrap up on this. There's lots of discussions going around. We're a few weeks away. For those of you who don't know about the NICE position, it will make us fundamentally the widest in the globe. We have recently been to EASD. Our access in technology in type 1 is streets ahead out of any European country at the moment, or any other organization. But here's the problem. This is what me and Gerry went around. Implementation is going to be a challenge. This is the scatter plot which shows pump pickup rates. We have been to areas, me and Gerry, where the total pump, people on pumps in certain centers, 42%. And you go, that's brilliant. And we've also been on the same day to another place where the total number has been 0, to which we have politely suggested that might be a slightly low number. But there are issues about uptake. So this is the story at the moment. CGM access in pregnancy, Dexcom 1, Freestyle Libre. It doesn't matter where you are, you get it. And I've said this to everybody. You got type 1 diabetes, you're not getting it, you let me know. I will pick up the phone. So, what else is coming? You have got the young type 2 diabetes, which Helen Murphy mentioned about. We have got the GIRFT. We're looking at a pediatric component of the diabetes side. There is the genetic work that's been going on. And the future is going to be quite interesting as you go along. So I think inpatient diabetes. So today there will be the appointment of the successor of Jonathan Vallabhji, whoever that is. But one of the fundamental, so those who have asked me saying, what is the future? I think there's one basic thing that needs to happen, which is keep people safe when they come to hospitals, right? That's the first thing. Then you give them better self-management, peer support, all of that. So that's pretty much a quick run through, and I deliberately whisked through because I would like to rather take some questions from all of you. But I'm going to finish with one thing, is don't forget the ethos. As I said at the very beginning, everything starts from here, and it's not glib. That's what the fundamental I bring to play. You can do a national role, you can do a local role, you can do your role, but it's got to come from the heart as to what you want to do. There is no bigger picture than improving diabetes care for you. None. It does not exist. That's what it says on the tin. That's what you do. And if due to your position, you're getting stuck by other people because they've got a big role that they hold in the NHS, well, for every bully, there's always a bigger bully, and you bring it to me. But the point I always say is that it has to come from the heart. And if you believe that you're doing the right thing, you'll always get through in the end. Because through this journey, one of the fundamental things is what I always say. People always say, how has this been achieved? It's been achieved by the support of all of you. But more importantly, it's been achieved by the people with type 1 diabetes. Look at what support they give. They stand with you. They will stand behind you. And in a crisis, who do you want? Do you want the people with type 1 or type 2? Or do you want your manager in play? I know exactly where it needs to sit. And that's where I probably will, that would be my message to all of you from NHS England, from a personal point of view. Keep your heart in the right place. You will always deliver. And I tell you that that's always been the motto. You stick to it, it's going to happen. I'll leave it there, and so you can take any questions. Thank you very much.
You've got some. Are you going to stay on? Cool. So we do have lots of questions. If you do want to ask any questions, do continue to put it on Slido because we're uploading them. So somebody said, please can Nadia return, because it was one of the most powerful tools that we had for change and particularly gaining executive support. Lots of clapping. Do you want?
I mean, I would really love it. I think it has been really inspiring. It gets us to understand what's going on. It brings people together. I know it's a one day a week, but actually it is really supportive of the whole of the inpatient team and the understanding of what's going on in your hospital. We have a number of people have been doing their own Nadia. There's been an electronic version developed as well at King's and one down in Southampton and so on. We need the funding to do that, and at the moment we haven't had the support to do that. The question is whether our new National Clinical Director would consider it something as a priority, but we'll wait and see.
And I think it's important to say that you all have a voice. If you genuinely believe that it helps patient care, you need to tell us. That's one of the conversations we're having with Andrea today, is that we have these meetings, feed it back to her. If that's what the nurse colleagues feel that is a fundamental thing of improving patient safety, it becomes our responsibility then to put it into national roles and policy. That's how these things work. So that would be my view. So
can I ask the room, if you think we should be putting the Nadia back in place, can you raise your hand? Right. Could someone take a photograph?
I can take a photograph.
Okay.
Everybody smile as well. Probably a video is better, isn't it? Okay, ready? Amazing.
Right. Thank you. I think that will really help.
Well, we'll put it on the desk for Jonathan's replacement on Monday.
You all do realize that this conversation is basically going to be Gerry then sitting down with me, showing me this picture.
There was an interesting question though a minute ago about Partha, how much do you think clinicians' beliefs in who's suitable for certain types of tech creates those inequalities, or?
So we are asked always this question, who should get tech? It's not our job to decide that. It's biased nonsense, right? Here's a simple thing, which I always say, do you want your loved one to have the device? If the answer is my loved one should have it, the patient should have it. That's the simple philosophy of life. You can have a debate about, what, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think bias does play a part in what you're offering. But I think in today's day and age, if you don't appreciate technology, and I'll give you one simple example of that. How many of you, let's give an example. How many of you remember putting your money in the bank by lining up? Going to the bank, hands up, don't worry, not showing your age, it's all good. Keep your hands up, those of you do it. How many of you still do it? Okay. How many of you remember a TV where you had to go up and change it by the hand? How many of you still got that? Right. You see, technology is part of our lives. We have evolved, but somehow we don't want to let our patients evolve. Right? This is what we do. We don't go like, do you know what, I really fancy having that TV with the remote where I just go up by hand. This is our day-to-day life. If we do it, our patients benefit from evolution of technology as well. So I think that would be my answer to that, is that bias does have a part, but you need to think about, would I give it to my loved one? If the answer is yes, the patient gets it.
Yeah, I mean, interesting, and we've asked you this question many times in our podcast and stuff, and I'm sure you get asked 100 times a week. How do we fund all of this when we don't have staffing and money and with everything coming in?
So we are working on it at the moment. There are lots of conversations. I'm meeting people I probably don't want to meet, but there we go. We appreciate that money will be needed to do it, but we've had this conversation about Libra 5 years ago. Where's the money? Who's going to do it? Everybody's got it. So I said this 4 years ago, and I'll say it today. You can match it out in 4 years later as well. 4 years ago, I came around and said, Libra is going to become standard of care in type 1 diabetes. And it is. Where are we now? 2023. 2027, closed loops will become standard of care in type 1 diabetes. If you're not learning about it, then you're going to fall behind. So my advice would be, shape up, let us worry about the money. It's coming like a big flood. So that's what I would say.
So it's actually amazing. When we wrote that GIRFT report, there was none of this. Look at where we are today. So, I think we have made tremendous strides in diabetes care, but we need to keep plugging at it. So technology is great, but one of the most important things in diabetes care is the people. And that is where we need to fight for making sure that if you've had your transformation nurses disappear, we've got to try and rectify that.
Amazing. Thank you both so much. That was really, really good.
I will answer that last question. When do we find the outcome of the tech appraisal? Because everybody's probably asked me this question about 25 times, and I'll get it again over lunch. You'll find out over the next 2 weeks.
Exciting. Thank you.